Hello everybody and welcome to Work Against the Grain. My name is Jeff. So this week what I'd like to talk to you guys about is keepsake boxes. As you know, we've made a couple of keepsake boxes here at Work Against the Grain. Only this time I took the Mother's Keepsake box that's available on the Vectric.com free projects website. And I took the project, and within Aspire and V-Carve, you have the ability to scale the objects up. So I took all of the components as it relates to the keepsake box, scaled it up 173.9%, kind of an odd percentage, but that's where it landed, and came up with this, which is approximately 17 5/8 by 10. And then I thought, you know, what could we do different as it relates to the top of the keepsake box? Rather than use the file that came with the free newsletter project, I decided that I wanted a domed or treasure chest. Boy, that's a tongue twister today, isn't it? Anyway, a treasure chest type top to go on top of this keepsake box. Well, how do we do that? There's a couple of ways that you could do it. You could certainly take a bunch of bowl blanks, glue them up, hollow them out, cut it in half. But I came across something called bird's mouth router bits that allows you to create what's called a stave constructed cone cylinder, or in this case, dome top. So what we'll do, I'll take you over to the router table, introduce you to the bird's mouth router bits, and we're going to cut some staves that we can then glue together and create a dome-shaped top for this beautiful keepsake box. Now, stave construction is really prevalent in sailboats. When they make the big, tall, 50, 60, 70-foot tall masts, in sailboats, they utilize stave construction, where you'll take pieces of wood and create an 8, 12, or 16-sided cylinder that you can then put on a lathe, turn it down, or do whatever you want. But it adds a lot of stability, rigidity to the construction of the cylinder. And in our case, it allows us to create a half dome that we can then assemble, attach to this beautiful keepsake box, and come up with something that's a little bit unique. So let's head over to the router table, show you how we constructed the staves, showed you how we glued them up, and ultimately put them on the keepsake box from Vectric. Again, thanks so much for watching. This is Work Against the Grain. My name is Jeff.
Okay, before we get headed over to the router table, first I wanted to illustrate for you what it is we're trying to accomplish. And here you can see this particular image would end up being a 12-sided cylinder, or for our purposes, a 6-sided dome. And as you know, we are going to make a 16-sided cylinder utilizing the 16-stave bird mouth router bit. Now, there are some requirements that we need to review first to identify things such as diameter, the number of staves, the stave width, the thickness, etc. And so as we go through these requirements here, you'll need to jot these down so that you can understand exactly the things that you need to know prior to heading over to the router table and beginning your cuts. Okay, now as for the diameter, you want your depth of your box times your depth of your box, in our case 10 times 10, divided by the number 4, then divide that by the number 3, then add 3, which in our case is our height, and you get a diameter of 11.33 inches in order to accomplish the half dome for our 10-inch box. Then we need to calculate the number of staves. And because we're using the 16 stave router bit, bird's mouth router bit, we take the number 16 times the height that we want our dome to be, in this case 3 inches, divided by the depth of our box, 10 inches, and then add a 1/2 inch. And so the math tells us 5.3 staves, and we're going to round that up to 6. So for this particular project, we need 6 staves. Continuing down the list of requirements, we now need to know how wide do we need to cut them. So we're going to take our diameter, divide that by 5, and we get 2.26 inches for the width of each stave. Now, for our sake, we're going to round that up to 2.5 inches, cut each stave that length to allow for overhang, trimming, and as we move through the project, you'll see later in the video that we then come back and trim off some of the staves to get a just right fit on the top of our box. And then finally, how thick? What is the minimum thickness we need in order to utilize these staves to span the width of our, or the depth of our box? So we're going to take our diameter, which in our case is 11.33 inches, divide that by 36, and we get 0.314. So the minimum thickness for our staves is 0.314. Now, I'd like to have a little bit bigger profile on this, a little bit thicker. I'm going to go ahead and use 3/4 inch stock. I just wanted to point out the mathematical calculation for you so that you could understand the thickness of the staves for your project. So now we've met all of the requirements in terms of how many staves we need, how wide, how thick, and what our diameter is. And now we need to focus on the cutter position. And this illustration here shows that on our 16-sided cutter, to get a roundable top, which would be flat on upper side, we need to have our bit relatively high. And as you see when we get to the router table, you will see that we do have the bit high because the bottom portion of the stock will roll along the fence. So I offer this illustration so that you'll also have it for the 6, the 8, and the 12-sided cutter. And then depending on what you want your profile to be, you could have a ribbed or faceted look and not do any sanding at all if that was the look you were looking for. Again, all of these diagrams, illustrations, and information are available in 2 places that I found: Lee Valley Tools and MLCS Tools, and I was able to put a link in the description. Let's go ahead and head over to the router table. Let's get set up and cut some staves. Okay, so here we are at the router table, and I want to show you first the bird's mouth router bits. Now, these particular ones I got from Amazon from a company called Woodline USA, and it comes in a set of 3 bits, and these bits are for making 8-sided, 6 or 12-sided, or what we're going to make is the 16-sided. So let me get the 16-sided bird's mouth router bit into the router table. I'll show you some setup and we'll make some cuts. Okay, there's 2 things that are very important here. Number 1, you have to have an edge that stays on your fence for safety. So when you look down here where the wood intersects the bit, you're going to want to make sure that right here you're just a little bit past the corner so that you leave yourself a 32nd of an inch. With the 16-sided bit, you run the inner face up, which means that the bit is going to take this wood away, and this is not going to come in contact with the fence as you push the stock through. And so this bottom edge is what's going to make contact with your fence. And then of course you want to make certain that your bit height here is set up appropriately so that you get your beak, if you will, the bird's mouth beak here, which is the inner portion when we go to assemble it. So this is really key to your setup here, is the fence distance to give you that 32nd of an inch minimum that will ride along the fence as you feed the stock through the router bit. Make sure that you have your ear protection, your eye protection, and your dust collection. Okay, so here's what I did. As you can see, I've got the staves all taped together right off of the router machine. Have not glued anything together, just have them taped. But what I did do, if you notice this front edge here, how that's lining up now with the box, whenever you put these staves together with the dome top, you're going to have one end that has a flat edge to it, and then you're going to have the other end or side that has the bird's mouth beak that is still there, but there's not another stave to glue to it. In this case, it was on this inner edge here. So what I did is I determined that this was a 70-degree angle, and I took it over to the belt sander and sanded off that bird's mouth beak so that we could then have this angle here setting nice and flush with the front of the box. Then what we need to do is we need to go to the back of the box here, and we need to determine that while the front of the box is lined up to the edge, we need to cut this back of the dome top also at a 70-degree angle so that it will fit flush up against the back of the box. And so I made the adjustments, marked a line where I need to cut the 70-degree angle, set up the table saw. I'll go cut the 70-degree angle off camera and be back to show you how it fits. Okay, if you recall, coming back to you now, I did cut the 70-degree angle back here, and keep in mind these are still a little bit long. And then, as you recall, the math told us that we needed 5.3 staves at 2.26 inches wide. We elected to cut 6 staves at 2.5 inches wide. So then we need to deal with the overall width, because as you recall, when I showed you the video earlier, the rear was hanging over the back of the box, indicating that the diameter was too large. So what I then did off camera was I came in and cut this front stave. I cut 1.5 inches off of it, so that now when you look at the front of the box, our edge lines up. And as I pan around here, the back of the box, the edge lines up. Now, we are not glued together yet,
Our joints still have some gaps. So what we're going to do is get it all glued up, get it all measured, get it all together, and let's see how we line up. Alright, so now we're ready for some glue up. And as we talked about, here's our beak right here. And this beak needs to go to the inside of the dome. So when you're assembling the pieces, you want to make absolutely sure that all of your beaks go to the inside. And then what we'll do is we'll apply some glue to the surface. Get that spread out along there very nicely. I like to glue them together in teams of 2. And again, beaks to the inside. Put your joint together like this. And if you'll apply pressure and rub them back and forth, you get a really, really, really nice solid joint. And there we go. Okay, and then I do like to put a little bit of duct tape just to hold the joint together. As you rub those together though, it makes a really, really nice tight bond. But if you'll take some duct tape and wrap it around your joint, around your 2 pieces, and then we just have a little bit of a ridge right here that I'll show you how we'll get rid of that when we get everything assembled. Okay, so we've got the 3 sets of 2 all glued up here, ready to go. And it's time to do some sanding on the inside and the outside and see if we can't get this thing shaped up. Okay, so we've got everything sanded, got it fitted on the top. Love how the front and the back edges line up. I do have a little bit of fiddling to do with the angles here as it meets the box on both the front and the back edges. I need to fine tune that, but again, this video was more to introduce the bird's mouth router bits and the stave construction more than it was to show you how to build the complete box. I just think it's really neat how you can utilize these bird's mouth bits to create these cylindrical shapes or half domes or cones, what have you. And again, don't forget to visit Lee Valley Tools and MLCS Tools to look at their bird's mouth router bits and the instructions. There's a full set of instructions online at both of those places. But it's really, really neat how this turned out and the joints. Love how the joints came out. So thanks again, everybody, so much for watching. Really appreciate your tuning in. This is Work Against the Grain, and my name is Jeff.